Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Tesla stock up 10% today. Yeah, this was kind of expected. The robotaxi launch went off without a hitch, without a problem. And here in this video, I will discuss, obviously, all of your news today, what analysts are saying about Tesla stock, partially the reason why you're up 10%. A lot of analysts just have discounted the robotaxi for so long. They've been under the assumption that it's all talk, it's never going to happen. And now that it's actually happened, you have to start modeling what that could look like over the coming years. And that pricing in and that modeling is effectively what is causing Tesla stock to rally 10% at the time of recording this video. You're going to hear a clip from Dan Ives in this video as well. He has some very bullish things to say about Tesla. He reiterates his $500 price target on Tesla stock. We also have some rumors coming out from the Middle East that Iran at some point within the next couple of hours is going to launch their retaliation against U.S. bases in that region. And, well, that risks escalating the conflict or settling the conflict. If Iran, doesn't kill anyone, which is presumably the U.S. didn't, they just destroy some things, then maybe we don't have to attack Iran back, and maybe, this conflict can get settled out. Also, Fed Bowman today is siding with Fed Waller in terms of maybe they should start reducing the Fed's rate, federal funds rate. And this is starting a larger divide between Fed officials where some are super hawkish, some are super negative, and some are growing more bullish or dovish on the prospect of lowering rates. So we have a lot of news to get into here in this video. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. If you guys want to come trade with us live in real time as well, every time I make a trade, I do send out alerts. And again, specifically what we do over there is we go through smaller cap companies every single day, hours and hours of research done every day. A lot of them are shit. A lot of them are terrible. A lot of them are not worth your time. But some of them are flying under the radar, doing big things that nobody knows about. Hence why you can make so much money in small caps or smaller cap names. They're not super small cap names, like $300 million market cap up to like $2 billion. Just nobody covers them. They don't have analyst coverage. They don't have retail investor bases. And I'm shocked at some of the opportunities that we are uncovering in that group. So come check it out if you have not done so already. Again, link down below in the description of this video. But let's get into what in the world is happening today for Tesla stock. So Elon Musk has said a lot recently on the robotaxi. In fact, yesterday, robotaxi customers only paid $4.20 as a flat fee to use the robotaxi service. The Tesla robotaxi app is now live. Okay, it says expires in 90 days. Not sure exactly what that's about. Nonetheless, it went off without a hitch, and users took multiple rides, and there was not an issue. Okay, now this is a different version of full self-driving. I think a lot of people need to understand that. Elon Musk said this about a week ago. This is a different version of FSD that is going to merge into the main version of FSD that is out in people's cars right now. And presumably it's a lot better. It's a lot smoother. It's a lot safer. And, that's where we can start to scale into different cities, different states, and get this service to its maximum potential. Now, as a lot of you guys have pointed out, sure, when there is a crash, especially if there is a fatal one at some point, it's going to be really bad for Tesla stock. So I do think the robotaxi increases, yes, the positives for Tesla, but it also raises the volatility risk for Tesla as well. Okay. And that's something, again, you shouldn't ignore. But I think, obviously, as we're judging by the stock being up over 10% today, is a big positive for Tesla stock. But again, don't be surprised one day you wake up and the stock's down 10% because there was an accident, whether it was the robotaxi's fault or not, whether it could have been avoided or not. Charles Key on X, he is with the autopilot and AI team at Tesla. He was a research scientist and manager at Waymo. Okay, he says, Tesla robotaxi, a new era begins. He says, I've very fortunately been part of multiple robotaxi launches, but this one is different and feels much more profound. It's a paradigm shift. It's the GPT moment for real world autonomy. Tesla's robotaxi runs vision only. No LiDAR, no radar, no HD maps, just video in, actions out. A single large model trained end to end. Many experts in autonomy doubted this could ever reach level 4. Some still do. But from 10 out of 10, robot to factory, driverless ops. And now a live service in Austin. Tesla keeps proving them wrong. What made this possible isn't more sensors or more complex engineering, but a different philosophy. We bet on end-to-end learning powered by massive data and fleet-scale reinforcement. This is the bitter lesson for physical real-world AI. Hand-coded rules, curated maps, and engineered pipelines don't scale. Data and compute do. Now let the scaling begin. So that's key right there. Let the scaling begin. As I said before this launch, what matters is how scalable is this? Do we have a fast scaling process? Do we have a slow scaling process? It is great. It is the coolest thing to finally have robotaxis out on the road after years of waiting. Okay, we all knew it was coming, and it's finally here. Okay, but it matters only what the scaling process looks like. 10 robotaxis out on the road is going to do literally nothing for Tesla's business from a financial perspective, and that's what Wall Street cares about. But getting thousands of robotaxis out on the road is going to have a substantial impact on Tesla's business. And then getting tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions out on the road is going to be revolutionary for Tesla's business. Hopefully as well from a profitability standpoint. We don't have exact guidelines for scalability. Like, we haven't heard Elon say what the scaling process could look like for Tesla. We've had some speculation before, but nothing more definitive. When we get the guidance of what scalability is going to look like how many cities is our robotaxis going to be in this year or next year or the year after that, that's when Tesla is really going to explode. That news could come out at any moment. Be prepared for that. And I think it probably gives Tesla another 10 to 20% upside from current levels, which I think at this pace, Wall Street's going to be chasing to catch up in terms of price targets and modeling what this could look like. Wall Street is already modeling what a scalable robotaxi is going to look like in the years to come. And you really can't put a solid valuation on the stock. Like, anyone's interpretation is fair. You could say the stock could be a $600 stock, and that's fair because the total addressable market for the robotaxi is so massive. It's everyone. It's everywhere. Everyone drives. It's the whole world. I mean, over time, of course. The question is, what timeline do you assign on scalability? And that's why I keep coming back to scalability, because that's the main kind of value unlocker for Tesla. Now that the technology is already here. Take a listen to what Dan Ives said about the robotaxi today on CNBC.
Personally, I'm sure everybody was a little disappointed you weren't there personally, but you had one of your associates and your team there. What did you make of these rides of few vehicles in a very limited geo-fenced off space?
I mean, I thought it was extremely smooth, everything we saw, not just from a safety perspective, maneuverability was way impressive. I thought actually better than even Waymo coming out of the gates. I mean, Frank, going in, I thought it would be an 8 out of 10. I think it was a 10 out of 10 relative to our experience, 2 15-minute drives that our team had. And I think the other thing is that this is just the start. Because I think a year from now, 25 to 30 cities, it speaks to this $1 trillion autonomous valuation that we believe alone will be for Tesla.
So Sarah, coming over to you, I mean, I'm going to take Dan's words. It's just a start. Other companies are ahead of it, including Waymo. Also, Amazon has its own self-driving company that they're rolling out as well. What did you make of what we saw and heard over the weekend?
You know, I actually just saw a report that apparently people are capturing videos of them speeding, swerving into the wrong lanes. And look, I'm not a great driver. You can ask my mom, but also not a computer car that's supposed to lead a company to $1 trillion market cap. And so, you know, the whole sort of premise of robotaxis is that they are safer and more efficient than having real drivers in the car because there's a lot of cost to them. So, you know, is Tesla behind Waymo? Yes. I've lived in San Francisco for a long time. So I've seen almost every iteration of self-driving cars testing. I still have a lot of concerns about the fact that they don't have LiDAR, that they're not releasing a ton of safety data. Time will certainly tell. I agree with Dan that it is the beginning, but I think that the reality is that they're pretty far behind most of their competitors.
All right, Sarah, I'm going to stick with you for a second. Let's talk about the broader tech trade. We were showing some of the Mag 7 stocks pretty muted this morning. What does that say to you about the tech trade right now? Does that say that investors are not looking for a safe haven, or do they maybe no longer see these names as safe havens?
I think it's really hard to find a safe haven right now. You know, and one of the risks, I think, in this sort of uncertain geopolitical environment is that if cyber warfare becomes a part of that story, some of these software names might look a little bit less safe. You can't really bomb Microsoft, but you certainly can hack them, right? And so I think that there's some of that. The reality is a lot of these have been trading at relatively high multiples. There are still names I like in there. I like Meta. I like NVIDIA. But, you know, I think that it's a time of uneasiness and there's not a lot of enthusiasm to buy into something that you're already overweight in.
So, Dan, that leads us to the cyber trade right now. We had a guest on last week calling Iranian cyber professionals some of the most sophisticated, whether it's defense or offense. With that in mind, do you have some top picks in the cyberspace just to kind of play some of these geopolitical tensions and the potential Iranian threat?
Yeah, look, I think cybersecurity is going to get a huge bid today because it's just going to give another tailwind. CyberArk, Palo Alto, CrowdStrike. And I think Zscaler is another one. I mean, I think, look, this is just going to speak to just more tailwinds that you're going to see for cybersecurity plays. I also think Palantir is going to get more and more of a bid because they're going to benefit, I think, on both sides. But I think it just shows that, you know, Sarah had some great points. I believe it's actually a risk on. I think you're going to see tech is going to be on today because ultimately it's going to be viewed as the black swan event in terms of Middle East is removed relative to a week in Iran. And that is, I think that's been a concern for investors. And also think about what's happened in the Middle East with AI. I mean, in terms of UAE and everything.
Take a listen to what Dan Ives said about Tesla's scalability of robotaxi, which again is the only thing that really matters at this point.
Does growth justify the multiple? Joining us now is Dan Ives, Wedbush Global Head of Technology Research. Dan, happy Friday.
Great to be here.
So Alphabet's Waymo is way ahead of Tesla on autonomous execution. So how much better does Tesla have to be? You have to believe its model is to believe it's $1 trillion opportunity for Tesla alone.
Yeah, look, Waymo clearly, you know, the big head start, but 4 cities, $230,000 cars, right? I mean, my view is the golden age of autonomous starts on Sunday in Austin for Tesla because it's the scale and scope. I mean, John, my view is like 25 to 30 cities in the next year. And as they start scaling cyber cabs and get to true level 4, I believe it's $1 trillion opportunity valuation for Tesla. And I think this is actually the start of their biggest chapter of growth and actually valuation upside.
Don't they have to be almost perfect to get to 25 to 30 cities? within a year, have that kind of scale. And so how do you factor risk into this model too? I mean, to ramp this, Tesla has to first put its own vehicles on the street, but it also wants Tesla owners to offer up their cars as well. Do they need that to achieve the profitability that makes them worth $1 trillion?
It's a great question. I don't think that they need that. I mean, to me, it's really, when I view cyber cabs and where I see this all going, I mean, I think ultimately 20% of the transportation industry, in my view, will be autonomous when we look out the next 6, 7, 10 years. I think Tesla, it starts off with, when you look at what's happening with cyber cabs, but ultimately other automakers, they're going to have to OEM that technology from Tesla. So my view is that this is the start. When you think about AI and you think about true AI and really what the golden goose is going to be, autonomous, Tesla, I believe, is going to lead this market handily. And ultimately, it all starts on Sunday with the launch in Austin. But I think it's step by step. They're going to show that they could get true level 4. And I think we're going to look back. Sunday, I think, is a historical moment for Tesla.
Is there room for everyone, though? I mean, we're talking about Tesla looking to Sunday, Waymo, which is obviously deploying in cities and continues to grow its licenses. New York City, for example, earlier this week. You've got the dark horse in all of this, too, which is the Amazon-backed Zoox autonomous fleet that's being built out, too. If you're only talking about potentially 20% of vehicles in the U.S. becoming autonomous in coming years, is there room for everyone?
Look, I think there's room for others, and you're going to have a convergence in terms of transportation tech, just like you talked about. Waymo will clearly be a player. Uber, obviously they'll partner more and more. But I think, look, when it comes to true scale and scope, I don't think anyone matches Tesla.
Also in the news today, UBS raised their price target on Tesla stock from $190 per share to $215 per share, although they still have a sell rating on the stock. Now, option activity today from hedge funds and institutions is very strong. 229 different trades totaling $178.38 million with a positive order value of 81%. So hedge funds and institutions are definitely bullish on Tesla today. If we look at total options volume, 63% of which is calls and about 37% of which is puts. So definitely a bullish skew towards the options market today. Short interest of free float sitting at 2.74%, $24.73 billion sold short in Tesla, totaling 76.75 million shares that are sold short. You do have today 2.23 million shares that are being, at least on net, sold short. So you have 2.84 million shares sold short and return shares of 611,000. These numbers could update by the end of the day, but that's a lot of shorting pressure, which, again, isn't super surprising on a day where Tesla is massively outperforming the rest of the markets, and we do have this lingering volatility. Take a listen to this 2-minute long clip on CNBC. Fed Michelle Bowman says it's time to consider adjusting rate policy. This is sending the odds of a July rate cut soaring higher today.
David, thank you. Fed Governor Michelle Bowman saying that if inflation remains contained, she would support lowering rates in July, becoming the second Fed official, actually second Fed governor as well to say so. She says it is time to consider adjusting the policy rate. The data, she says, have not shown clear signs of impacts from tariffs, and the progress on tariff negotiations could lead, she expects to lead, to a less risky economic environment. The tariff impact could take longer, be more delayed, and smaller than expected. Higher prices from tariffs, she says, are being offset by other factors. She does talk about the current conflict in the Middle East, saying it could lead to higher commodity prices. Part of another section of her remarks where she just still has some concerns about inflation. But overall, she says we should put more weight on the downside risk to employment. Guys, this is a particularly significant development when it comes to how the committee is thinking and where it may be moving.
I know we don't want to go here, Steve. Fed is not political, right? They don't make their decisions that way. However, it is notable that she, is Republican, appointed by Republican president, another one, who is looking through the tariff price increases, while some of the Democrats on the committee, Adriana Kugler, for instance, the governor who was appointed by the Biden administration, are more worried about the inflationary effect. It's sort of like what we see in the University of Michigan sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely have that. You could definitely do that delineation. It leaves Powell a little bit of an odd man out in that regard, Sarah, because he seems to be also more worried about tariffs and more wait and see approach. I think it's a bit about taking a flyer on Trump's policies and the extent to which Fed officials are willing to roll the dice and go with the data that they saw in May and part of their forecast. Bowman, I also should say, mentions deregulation as a possible source of containing prices down the road and other policies that are out there. So she's pretty positive on that. And, you know, Sarah, when it gets to the idea of, well, who does the president want in the driver's seat on the Fed? Someone who believes in their policies. And I think that's where they maybe cut. There may be politics, but it also may be a factor of being cut from the same cloth.
So that was also another big shift today and big news for markets. It now leaves the odds of a July cut on July 31st at 23.5%. Current odds still favor a pause through July 30th at 76.5%. But these odds last week were like 97% chance of a continued pause. So you're up a lot in just the last, couple of days in terms of, the odds of actually getting a cut. If you get another Fed official that joins them, or maybe another one, then you could pretty shortly here be pricing in a cut for July. Now, also in the news today, Iran moves launchers for a possible attack on U.S. forces, according to the Wall Street Journal. And there's been a credible Iranian threat against the U.S.-run Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar since noon on Monday, according to a Western diplomat. And according to Axios, the Trump admin is preparing for Iran attack on U.S. Gulf bases. And China urges citizens in Qatar to avoid Al Udeid Air Base. So they're very publicly announcing what the retaliation is going to be. It's really just a matter of time and a matter of, does anyone die? If nobody dies, if no U.S. personnel are injured, then this might be just a retaliation and over for now, which could actually be positive for markets. I mean, this is kind of how Iran works. They don't want a full-scale war with the U.S. That is not in their best interest. But they also don't want to look weak on a global stage, or most importantly, to their citizens. Okay? So they have to do something. And again, they're not like the U.S. that is going to do it and then announce it later. They're going to give plenty of warning to U.S. officials that an attack is coming. It says here that U.S. jets are scrambling over Saudi Arabia. It says French fighter jets along with British jets are now active over the Middle East. And Fox News is warning of an imminent threat of Iranian attack on Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Iran's president says, "We neither started the war nor wanted it, but we will not leave the aggression against Greater Iran unanswered." And the airspace over U.S. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar is now officially closed, according to a new NATOM. It says the UAE is planning to shut its airspace too, according to a reporter on X. And Turkish companies cancel flights to the UAE. So this is coming literally any minute. It says the Americans evacuated planes from the base in Qatar in advance, according to satellite images. Again, they're going to give a warning to get people out of that base so they don't escalate the conflict. Iran does not want a war with America. And this news says Iran is preparing to fire missiles at American bases in the coming minutes, according to an Axios reporter on X. But again, I will just reiterate this headline that says there has been a credible Iranian threat against the U.S.-run Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar since noon on Monday. So again, they're giving a heads up that this is coming. And I would imagine they probably gave a heads up over this weekend. So it is confirmed that 3 missiles fell directly on the US Al Udeid base in Qatar. And reports of sirens are still sounding at all US bases across the Middle East, including Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and Oman. Trump is currently in the Situation Room with Defense Secretary and Joint Chiefs, CNN citing an admin official. And it's being rumored that Iran launched 10 missiles towards US bases in Qatar. Iran's Tasnim says missile operation is called Annunciation of Victory, launched against US bases in Iraq and Qatar. But you can actually see oil is selling off pretty dramatically now, down almost 3% today, which this could be seen as like a one and done. Iran, retaliated. If nobody died or whatnot, then the US doesn't have to retaliate, and we can start to get more towards a diplomatic resolution. Again, judging on energy, it does seem like the worst of this situation is probably behind us. Now, just as expected, Qatar says there are no casualties from the attack on US military bases. Qatar says they reserve the right to respond to this blatant attack. Iran's top security body says armed forces used the same number of bombs that the US had used in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. And it's being said that US aircraft takes off from Saudi Arabia's air bases. And there were, again, no casualties from attacks on US military base. So that is really bullish from a market perspective. Qatar says they intercepted a missile barrage on Al Udeid Air Base. Qatar says no incident, no casualties from missile attack, so it doesn't even look like a missile actually hit the ground. Qatari Ministry of Defense says we confirm that the airspace and territory of the state of Qatar are safe and that the Qatari armed forces are always on alert. And markets are bouncing following this news. Looks like energy markets are also selling off, which is a sign that maybe the worst again is behind us and we can get back to negotiating. Now, the CNN Fear and Greed Index is now back into neutral, coming in today at 54. So back into neutral territory. The percent of stocks that are trading above their 50-day moving average back down to 60.86%. Still kind of on the higher side, but back to more of a normal range. And the latest AI investor sentiment survey shows bullish investors at 33.2%, bearish investors at 41.4%, and neutral investors at 25.4%. So you still have bears that dominate this market in terms of sentiment, which leaves me to believe there's still quite a bit of upside in this market. And as I've said before, you really want to watch the 588 level on the SPY. That is kind of where I have this trend line here. If, well, I guess it's technically a little bit lower than that. It's around the 587 level. If you can stay above that, situation looks still pretty constructive. If you break down below that, then you fall into the 570s and come down to your potentially 200, 100 or 50-day moving average. So let me know your thoughts on all of this down below in the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.